our bodies have the most beautiful innate healing capacity. We need good sleep, clean water, sunshine, really good food, and just those very simple things. Really, your body can heal from so many things.
Welcome to Commune. We are on a mission to inspire, heal, and bring the world closer together. Okay, here we go.
All
Neka
right.
Pasquale, welcome to the Commune podcast. Great to be with you.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be talking to you today.
I'm really excited. I'm excited to get into it and learn everything that you're doing at Urban Remedy and how you're applying your food philosophy as food as healing to the products that you make and the business that you run. But maybe we can start with some of your background. I know that you have a significant background in traditional Chinese medicine. You're a licensed acupuncturist and herbalist and certified Chinese nutritionist. So I wonder how Chinese medicine influenced your food philosophy.
I've always loved food. I'm half Jewish and half Italian. And so I grew up with like the Jewish bubby and then, my Italian grandmother who both, just cooked 24/7. So I've always really loved food and cooking. It's always been a passion of mine. And actually, I did my pre-med because I knew I wanted to do something in health, and I knew the Western medicine wasn't the way for me. And so I wanted to study naturopathic medicine, but at that time it was illegal in California. And so I was like, well, I'm going to study Chinese medicine and become an acupuncturist because you're considered a primary care physician in California. So I could treat the things illegally that I was interested in treating at that time. And so I jumped in to acupuncture school, which is a 4-year program. And I thought, I'm just going to do this. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. When I started studying food as medicine, it was so interesting to me to learn that every food has a taste and a temperature and associated meridian and actual functions that in Chinese medicine, they've been using for thousands of years. And that was so exciting for me too. My mind, the wheels started turning and I was like, oh, this is so cool. I could make PMS cookies and I could, at that time, I had the most amazing, one of my instructors was incredible, and he would take us to Chinatown, and they would you'd go into the restaurant and they would feel your pulse, and then they would give you a soup or a meal based on what they felt in your pulse. And it was so magic. And anyways, it really inspired me. And then, once I started my private practice, I also was really lucky because I got to study with some amazing doctors in functional medicine right after I was licensed. So I was kind of incorporating those things that I was learning about. I got to study with Dr. Robert Marshall, who started Premier Research Labs. And he was just the coolest guy. And he would talk about the energetics of food. And he would take us, I used to shadow him, and we would go at lunch and go into the grocery store. And he would talk about like organic blueberries compared to regular blueberries or whatever it was, regular tomatoes versus organic tomatoes. And really the energetics of the food, meaning where the food is grown, the soil the food is grown in, if it's grown in sunshine and, obviously fertile soil, the energetics and the vibration of that food will raise the energetics and vibration of your body. And so learning about that and then combining that with what I'd learned in Chinese medicine was just really exciting for me. So I had my private practice for about 11 years, and I started treating a lot of people that had chronic inflammatory diseases, people that were pre-diabetic, people that had all kinds of pain syndromes, rheumatoid arthritis, and all that kind of stuff. And just really noticed that people that were willing to change their diet would get better faster, and people that were not willing to change their diet, and there's quite a few people that really don't want to change their diet, would not get better faster. And they would have to come in, once or twice a week to maintain the effects that they were getting from the acupuncture. And it was kind of interesting. Like, I remember a couple people coming in that said, my doctors told me I have prediabetes, and, I have to take this drug, or I might have to take metformin or some drug. And I said, if you change your diet, you will not have to do that. And I would help them and give them the dietary guidelines. And a lot of people just didn't want to do it. They just wanted to keep eating. They would rather take the drug and keep eating that way. And so then, also it's about acceptance, like it's your body. And so that's great if that's, what you want to do. But I started, I was really interested. I met this doctor who taught me about infrared saunas. And this was probably like 2004. And he was telling me how he has healed all these people. And I'd never heard of a sauna before. And so I got super inspired and I was like, I'm going to start doing retreats with my patients. So I took about 12 people. And they're all patients of mine to Stinson Beach. You and I were just talking about that, to this really big house. And I had people who were like severely chronic ill to people that just maybe wanted to lose a little bit of weight or whatnot. And did all live raw food, juicing, dehydrated food, and just made it like super beautiful and amazing experience. And then incorporated things like infrared sauna, stuff like that. And after 5 days, it was absolutely incredible, the change that I saw in every single person that was there. Like huge reductions in pain. People just felt inspired, their brain fog was gone. And so for me, I was like, wow, this is incredible that in 5 days you could radically change the way that you feel. And so that was really kind of how this journey started for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, we're reminded that the body is always in process, and it is really designed to move towards wholeness, and that's what I think of as healing. And it is amazing that even in over the course of 4 or 5 days, you were able to achieve the results that you were with, let's say, blood sugar levels. And that one is a big one for me because about 1.5 years ago, I discovered I was pre-diabetic, but I didn't even really know. Wow. I think about 90% of the people that have pre-diabetes don't know they actually do. Mm-hmm. But with just some relatively minor tweaks in my diet, I was able to regulate my blood sugar levels. So, it's amazing what you were able to accomplish and how that propelled you forward on this journey. I'm curious. I mean, Chinese medicine doesn't really like raw foods and salads as much. It actually tends to like, steamed white rice even. So I wonder how you kind of got your head around dealing with that.
That's such a good question. And people ask me that question a lot. Well, for example, when I was doing my retreats, I developed this mineral broth where I'd put different herbs in there and seaweed and things like that, and shiitake mushrooms and whatnot. And it was a very mineral rich broth. And so you would drink that throughout the day. And I've always, even with Urban Remedy, I'm always looking at the temperature of the juices, for example. So I usually incorporate like turmeric or ginger or warming herbs into the juices. And I also let people know that you don't have to drink juice freezing cold out of the fridge. Like you can take your juice out, pour it in a glass, let it sit there for, 25 or 30 minutes so that it's not cold. And you could do the same thing with salads. Like if you're making a salad, everything doesn't have to be cold. You can even warm up your lettuce. But the ingredients that you use, because everything, lettuce is very cooling. But once you add something like ginger or cayenne or peppers, then you're offsetting the temperature. It's like a herbal formula, right? We have herbs that we use that are extremely hot and toxic, but then we'll add like gansao, which is licorice that reduces the toxicity and kind of cools, and other herbs that help to cool the heat and balance the formula. So I try to look at the food that I develop the same way. But you are right. Like my herbalist that I work with, he doesn't eat anything cold. But I have to say, I've done so many different diets. I've done raw food for a long time and vegan and everything. And, some people really can't tolerate raw food and some people can, but I've seen people heal from things like cancer and lots of different pain syndromes by incorporating a raw food diet for a short time. And there's different people that can't tolerate that many vegetables and whatnot. So it really depends on the individual. And, people that are very young or very hot, they tolerate cooling foods more than somebody who's like cold and damp. And then for those people, it's probably not the best thing for them. But it's all about balance,
Right, right.
Yeah.
From the little I understand about Chinese medicine and its relationship to diet, it seems that dampness is something that you want to avoid or decrease
Yes.
within your system. And is that because it essentially clogs and blocks meridians such that qi cannot circulate properly through the body, and then you can address that through dietary change or through acupuncture?
Yeah. And there's a place for dampness and moisture, right? Because it's the yin fluid of the body, and we need our yin. Our blood is yin, and damp. But I would say with a Western diet, right? If we're eating a ton of dairy and ice cream, that's cold and damp, or tofu is very cold and damp. And so dampness, can cause qi stagnation and block qi, right? And so there's qi, moisture, and moisture relates to blood. And they all work together, right? So you want your qi to be moving and help your blood move, your circulation. And, there's this great saying is, of looking at the body as a garden, right? So there's streams, like our blood is like a stream, like a garden, and that we need that to moisturize our skin and, have healthy blood flow. But then when you have too much moisture and there's a storm outside and the rivers are overflowing, that's too much moisture and dampness. And that can happen in our bodies as well. So there's different areas that like dampness, and there's like the spleen and stomach hate dampness. So if you eat things that are cold and damp, your spleen and stomach you're going to have poor digestion. That's one of the things.
Yeah. So it really is. Absolutely. Yeah. It's about becoming intuitively aware of your own internal equilibrium or disequilibrium, and really becoming aware to how you cultivate that balance within you. You mentioned a few common herbs like ginger and I think ginseng maybe, and licorice. What are some of the herbs that you utilize the most just in your own life, but also in urban remedy products?
Because of the FDA, I try to really use food as medicine as much as I can, because once, I created this beautiful herbal tea, for example, that I was so excited to launch. And unfortunately, like I actually used to actually it was launched and I did not make it anymore because the FDA got in and, anyways, I won't get into that story, but wow. So I try to really utilize food as medicine. So I use things like dandelion and burdock root for blood purification and liver health. I use a lot of turmeric, and we juice it, as well as use the powder sometimes. And then ginger, same thing. Fresh ginger has a different medicinal property than dried ginger. So I'll use both of those. And then I use, different medicinal mushrooms like my lion's mane and reishi and things like that. I would love to incorporate more Chinese herbs. But the other thing is like what we just talked about, since everybody has a different constitution, it's really better if you're doing herbal formula to work one-on-one with an acupuncturist or an herbalist, because one thing that's good for you might be very detrimental to somebody else. Like some people have a lot of dampness. So, it's really interesting. I see there's companies that use like Hesha Wu for skin and hair, and they give it to people alone. And in Chinese medicine, we never give it alone because it is the most damp, cloying herb, one of the most damp, cloying herbs out there. So when we use it in a Chinese medicine formula, we use herbs to transport and transform dampness so that you don't have the side effect of creating stagnation, like damp stagnation.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you're always using herbs within a matrix.
Yes. Yeah. It's very rare that a Chinese herbalist will give you a single herb because the herbs work synergistically together. And you have to understand, like I was talking about, the toxicity of specific herbs, or if herbs are too hot and you add something cooling, it just creates this neutrality. So you're not going to end up being too hot, for example.
Yeah. When you were treating your patients, some of whom were probably highly inflamed, and I'm not sure you were doing like biomarkers, C-reactive protein biomarkers, et cetera, but there are other kind of indications of inflammation in the system. And I'm curious, were there foods that you found to be the most pro-inflammatory in these people's diets?
Without question, you know, I would say genetically modified grains, wheat, corn, soy, and then just highly processed foods. So if you're eating especially GMO sugar with, it's really the standard American diet, right? If you're waking up and eating, a sugary cereal with non-organic dairy and then like a hamburger for lunch, and it's like factory farm meat with, wheat and potatoes cooked in canola oil or soy oil, you're eating a sludge of just inflammatory causing foods. And so I think it's a really serious problem. And if you look at, our farming system and our industrialized farming system and, the pesticides that are used and how it's degrading the soil, it's just reflective of what it's doing to people's bodies that are eating that food. And that's something that I'm really passionate about, is educating people on, the difference between organic and non-organic and conventional and GMO, non-GMO.
Yeah, well, maybe we can poke at that a little bit deeper, because there are so many different organic certifications. I think there's at least 4.
Yeah.
And could you pull those apart a little bit and also point to kind of where Urban Remedy falls within that matrix?
Yeah. So they're certified organic. And interestingly, when I first started Urban Remedy, I was like, well, I know just out of, everything that I've done, like, I'm definitely going to start out with being certified organic. And so I got the paperwork and I thought I would just fill it out and be done. But one of the problems with being certified organic is that it's extremely expensive, extremely time consuming. And for a business like ours, where we have so many ingredients, we have to hire people just to manage the paperwork, because you have to trace every single ingredient back to the farm that it came from, which is a really beautiful thing, right? Because we can tell you exactly in your salad, if you called us and we looked up the lot code, where the farms that we got all these ingredients from. But I guess the slight problem with it is it's very expensive, and we want to try to make organic farming less expensive for the farmer and for the businesses so that we can offer that discount to consumers. But anyway, that's a side note. So certified organic is really the cleanest food that you can buy, because it doesn't incorporate toxic pesticides and chemicals like glyphosate. It's automatically non-GMO. And there's things like, if you look at farming, the animals have to be treated, in a specific way. They can't be they can't be factory farmed. There's no sewage sludge involved. So there's all of these things that encompass being certified organic, which has to do, with, creating a food product that's grown in soil that is not degraded and dead. And so, and then they recently started doing, and we offer a few of these items, certified regenerative is a newer thing. And that automatically is organic, but it goes another layer up where it's certified regenerative to the soil. And it's an amazing, I'm actually going to do a podcast on it in a couple of weeks, but it's absolutely incredible. And then there's non-GMO, which in my opinion, I think should never have necessarily been a label, because I think it's very deceptive to the consumer, because a lot of people, I've talked to so many people like, well, I go to the grocery store and everything I get is non-GMO certified. And it's great in the sense that then you're not eating genetically modified, but that is not organic, which means it's still probably sprayed with glyphosate and different herbicides. And it doesn't mean anything about the soil. It just means that they're not using GMO seeds. And a lot of people think that non-GMO certified means organic, but it doesn't. And then there's conventional, which obviously means it doesn't mean that it's GMO. I mean, there's certain things that they don't use GMO seeds for. But if you are eating conventional produce, for example, most likely it's sprayed with herbicides and pesticides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder if you feel that there's any place for biotechnology in agriculture. And I think, most of us who are in the health and wellness space, we bristle against anything that might be considered genetically modified. And I think that inclination is because we generally conflate genetic engineering with big cash crop like Roundup resistant seeds. Mm-hmm. And there's every reason to be on high alert about Roundup resistant seeds for many, many reasons. And we could talk about, glyphosate and the negative knock-on impacts of glyphosate for some time, and maybe we'll touch on that.
Yeah.
But GMO doesn't necessarily mean Roundup resistant. So, like, for example, I remember there was this, the papaya, like, for example, in Hawaii, which was being, like, completely decimated by this ring spot virus.
Yeah.
And it basically was just crushing the entire farming industry. And I think Cornell University and Hawaii University collaborated to develop a genetically engineered virus-resistant seed. Didn't have anything to do with herbicides and pesticides per se. And this really did bring the papaya industry back to life in Hawaii. And, then there's like golden rice, which is biofortified with beta carotene to address vitamin A deficiencies, et cetera. So I wonder if you see any place for genetic engineering in the world of food.
To be honest, I don't. And I might be, I definitely have a strong opinion on it. I think that in the research that I've done, the golden rice is a great example. I mean, it's totally failed. And if you really look into it and what it's done to India and the farmers there, it's destroyed, thousands of farmers' lives. And they were promised, I mean, it's a whole story that probably we don't want to go down that road. And the same thing happened in Hawaii. If you look at Hawaii where this is happening, the people of Hawaii did not want those seeds on their island, and they did it anyway. And there was, I guess, schools that were, and I heard about this a while ago, so I hope I'm saying it correctly, but there were schools that were around the farms that were growing the papayas with the GMO seeds. And supposedly it was making the communities right next to it very sick, especially the children in the schools that were there. And so, I think there's other ways of working with things like that don't have to include GMOs. I think my, perspective, I mean, I think there could be a place for everything, but when you're adding proteins that have never before been in food, I think it's a dangerous game. And I believe that there are certain things that we can do that we cannot recover from. And I think that nature has so much wisdom and always has. And the answers usually lie in living in harmony with the natural world and not necessarily technology. I mean, if you look at, where we are right now and why our soil is so degraded, and, the monarch butterflies are, close to extinction and things like that. And bees, when you look at the reasons why, it's related to what we've done as human beings, and spraying pesticides in crops. And I think that we're in this mess because we keep trying to use technology to get out of, to solve a problem. But really, I believe the problem is we become so disconnected to nature and we live so out of harmony with the natural world that we are the ones creating problems. Like if you really look into, feeding the world, there's plenty of food. We don't need GMOs to feed people. But I think that's a lie that we were fed based on, the Gates Foundation and all of that. And it's, and I'm not saying that I'm not a conspiracy theorist around this stuff, but I've studied it. And I have some friends that are part of they have a group called, oh no, now I'm forgetting what they're called. There are a bunch of doctors and scientists that study GMOs, and I've gotten to go to some of their conferences. And anyways, I don't believe that's the way forward.
No, I think it's a very interesting debate. And
yes.
I think, on some level, farmers have been genetically engineering seeds for millennia, but they've been doing it very slowly with crossbreeding plants, et cetera, and essentially giving time for evolution and nature to work together in conjunction with the development of new kinds of seeds, and at the same time maintaining control over their own inputs. That's a whole nother issue, right? Once you accept genetically modified seeds, you're often ceding control over your inputs as a farmer to, in many cases, multinational corporations, and that generally doesn't end well. But I think it's an interesting debate because it's, as I said, my general inclination is to bristle against anything GMO and to trust nature. And, at the same time, I think it's interesting. Is there ways that we can use technology responsibly to biofortify? So, anyways, I would just make one comment on that. I would say that when farmers are, using, I wouldn't say that they are genetically modifying their own crops. I would say if you're taking a fish gene and putting that in a tomato, that's something that no farmers are doing. So I think it's really important when you look at the genes that are being put into our fruits and vegetables, it's not like they're taking necessarily one tomato and hybridizing it with another. They're taking genes that have never been historically, would never ever in nature be put together. And sometimes I think that can be very dangerous. I totally agree. I mean, gain of function agriculture doesn't sound like something that we totally want to get into.
And and really the thing is, like, why? Like, nature is perfection. It's like our bodies, like we were talking about earlier, we're taught in our society that, we might need a pill or, something to make us healthy. Or you watch TV and now it's like, oh, here's this. My son and I have a joke about this. We were watching a show and this commercial kept running over and over and over. And it was called Skyrizi. Sorry, maybe I shouldn't say that, and we were making joke. We're like, what the hell is Skyrizi? And at the end, they're like, well, it can cause, cancer or death or all of these things. But anyway, when you watch this and you're a young kid, it kind of, it's kind of normalized. Like disease is normal. Like it's really normal to get cancer. when 50 years ago it was not normal. And so we're really taught to disassociate from our bodies, and knowing that our bodies have the most beautiful innate healing capacity, and they don't need all of those things to be healthy. Our bodies can do it on our own. We need good sleep, clean water, sunshine, really good food, and just those very simple things. Really, your body can heal from so many things. So I just think it's important to remind people that, you already have that capacity built into your body.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we touched on some of the pro-inflammatory foods. I think you kind of nailed the checklist there. Fried foods with vegetable and seed oils, all the artificially sweetened foods, sodas and sweetened drinks and juices, refined grains. Obviously, well, actually, what is your general viewpoint on meat consumption as it pertains to inflammation?
So I think, first of all, it's a hard, because people are so
I know. I'm setting you up for controversy.
So it's okay. So this is my honest feeling. And I just spoke at a vegan conference recently. And I said a couple things that really pissed some people off that were there, because I was talking about some of the fake meat and the plant-based meat. And I was saying they're super inflammatory, and the ingredients are all, inflammatory causing. They're not, it's not healing food that lowers inflammation. And, I was just kind of bringing that to the attention. And there's a feeling that if, it's a plant meat and you're not eating an animal, that it doesn't matter. But for me, it does matter, because I'm looking at through the lens of a healthcare practitioner. So I'm thinking, I would like you to eat food, and I would like to eat food that naturally lowers inflammation. So I think that factory, and there are people that are going to eat meat no matter what, right? We're never going to get everybody to stop eating meat. So, excuse me, I would say that if you are going to eat meat, eat organic pasture-raised meat. If you're eating meat that is factory farmed, then you are, I don't know. Did you ever see the movie Eating Animals?
No, I don't think so.
It's such a great film. And one of my investors was one of the producers, and it's not an anti-meat film at all, but it really talks about factory farming and what happens in factory farmed animals. And if you watch it, you probably would never eat factory farm meat again, because truly the animals are treated so horrifically. And so I always say, like, you're really making, that's one point where you're voting with your dollars. And pasteurized organic meat is a little bit more expensive, but now you could get it at Costco and, lots of different places like Trader Joe's and stuff like that. So I would say if you were going to eat meat, then choose organic pasture-raised, grass-fed if you're doing, obviously, red meat. And if you're eating it in its natural state, meaning it's not like a highly processed hot dog or, bacon or things like that, or sausages, I think that there can be health benefits to it. But I think it really depends on the person, and especially your moral beliefs around eating meat. But I do think there is a place for very clean, organic, pastured meats. I mean, and even if you look in Chinese medicine, meats are used as part of the medicine, right? To tonify the qi, tonify your blood. And so there's a place for meat in the diet.
Yeah, I share your beliefs on this one. And I think, it really it's about consumption levels.
Yes.
I mean, if you look at some of these cultures where, there's the greatest preponderance of centenarians, et cetera, some of the blue zones, meat is included in those diets, but it's generally included as something to provide additional flavor and not as like the absolute main course 16-ounce, sirloin or something like that. And
Yeah.
so for us, we don't consume a lot of red meat, but from time to time, we're actually fairly regular fish eaters, and from time to time we'll have like as you say, some ethically raised organic meat. And there's obviously a lot of bioavailability of certain kinds of compounds in meat, which that you can also get through a plant-focused diet. It's just a little bit more difficult, and you have to probably know a little bit more about what you're eating. But yeah, it certainly is a incendiary topic. And I think we're both super into the regenerative agriculture community. And I just don't know if there are enough grasslands on an acreage basis in the world for people to eat regeneratively raised beef at the same consumption levels that
Yeah.
people are eating it now. So I think, regardless where we come out on this issue, I think it's about lowering overall consumption, eating higher quality in moderation. And then obviously, we can argue about the ethical dimensions
Yeah.
of it. So anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think if everybody ate less meat, that's a critical piece for sure. And I also think, eating local to where you live is really important. And that can also relate to meat consumption, even related to fish or things like that. I mean, I think one of the biggest problems is that, we also overconsume fish, and we're flying fish, across the world, for sushi in middle America and whatnot. So I think the more we try to eat locally where we live, that's also one of the things that can really help, heal the planet and our bodies.
Yeah. So as we're lingering around fish, and specifically when I think about fish, I think of like the small bottom of the food chain kind of oily fish, sometimes known as the smash fish. So sardines, mackerel, anchovies, salmon, herring. Not all on the top of my list in terms of flavor per se,
Yeah.
but they're certainly high in omega-3s, which are anti-inflammatory. So I wonder, we talked a little bit about pro-inflammatory foods. I wonder what some of your top anti-inflammatory foods would be.
I think, to keep it really simple, I think using culinary herbs, so like things like oregano, rosemary, parsley, cilantro, thyme. I mean, those have such huge health benefits and anti-inflammatory benefits, and you don't need a lot of them. So those are great to have around just to use in your everyday cooking. But then when you're at the grocery store, I think the easiest way to keep it simple is to choose things that are super colorful, right? Because all of those plant pigments have very, very strong anti-inflammatory properties. So obviously like blueberries and wild blueberries and strawberries and red cabbage and oranges and, everything that is brightly colored and has the carotenoids and the anthocyanins and all of that. Those tend to be very, very anti-inflammatory. And then it's like just eating real food. I think that, it's like twofold. It's like asking yourself, am I eating the foods in the standard American diet that cause inflammation, like making sure you're not eating the oils we talked about and all of that. It's just as much obviously as what you're cutting out and then what you're adding. And so, and eating foods that, for some people might be easy to digest, like doing soups. Soups are a really great way to increase your digestive capacity because they're really easy to digest. And you can add things like ginger and lemongrass and things like that, or fresh herbs or rosemary and things like that. So, I think soups are super, super great for people that have digestive issues like colitis and things like that. It's a really great way to get nutrition in and lower inflammation at the same time. Yeah.
Nice. So let's move on a little bit to urban remedies specifically. First of all, I love the name. We talked a little bit before we started recording about branding and that we're both hand wringers when it comes to branding and look and feel and design. I have a very specific association with the name Urban Remedy, but I'm curious what the provenance of it was for you.
Yeah. When I had my acupuncture practice, I started Urban Remedy, through my retreats that I was doing, and people kept wanting the food and everything. And then I was making these snacks, these banana brittle snacks, and it was just like dehydrated banana with coconut and like some other things that were super good. And people wanted them, and they buy every single bag. And then I was like, what am I going to call this? And I was sitting with a friend of mine, and we were like, well, this is kind of like the urban an answer to, our busy lifestyle. And so we were like just tooling around with a bunch of different names, and Urban Remedy came up. And it was really funny because when I first started Urban Remedy and stopped my acupuncture practice, and people were thinking of investing, they were like, some people would be like, I love what you're doing, but I hate the name. Like, it's the worst name. And I was like, oh, I love it, so we're just going to keep it. But some people really, really love it. And for some people, they don't completely get it. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why anyone would not resonate with it. I mean, for me, it sort of suggests how modern urban life is essentially hijacking our adaptive mechanisms. So all of these kind of urban comforts that are relatively new to human existence, 24/7 food accessibility, on-demand entertainment, endless technology, even temperature control. All of these comforts, in a way, use our own adaptive mechanisms against us in some ways. And we're actually designed and have evolved to withstand a good deal of discomfort, scarcity, darkness, temperature fluctuation, et cetera. And these adaptive mechanisms actually confer a health benefit in relation to some of these discomforts. But our kind of modern urban life is like so cushy that, we're in an endless feeding cycle, or we're getting blue light at night, or we're never getting too hot, or we're never getting too cold. We're always sitting in a chair. We're always wearing big padded sneakers. We're never squatting. We're never making ourselves uncomfortable. And you're providing the remedy for some of those modern urban comforts that I think are really undermining health. So for me, it really works.
Thank you. I'm glad.
Yeah. So you decided to become a B Corp, and I wonder if you could explain to folks what a B Corp is, and what are some of the criteria associated with being a B Corp, and why was that important to you?
Yeah. I have to give credit to one of our investors, Trip Baird, because he...
Oh, I know Trip.
Do you know Trip?
Sure,
yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
He's
funny.
so great. So one day he emailed me. He was like, Neka, you guys are already doing all the stuff to be a certified B corporation. And, most of his I think maybe all of his portfolio companies are certified B corporations. So I looked into it. I didn't even know about it. I've been like, my head was so down with Urban Remedy, I didn't even know what it meant or anything. But on a very simplistic level, it means that they're companies that are doing good in the world on different fronts, meaning it's how you treat your employees, how you pay your employees. An example might be, when I started Urban Remedy, we have people that are in the leadership roles, and then people that are making food in production. And I made a decision early on that the people in production would have the same holidays, the same healthcare, all of that. So that is like one of the foundation. That would be one of our pieces of being a B Corp, is having that kind of equality, depending on your role in the company. being certified organic is a big part of our certified B corporation, which is, helping soil health and the environment and offering food that's healing to people on the planet. It's how your board looks and how you make decisions. Are you making decisions just for monetary gain, or are you also making decisions based on what's best for your employees and the communities that you live in? So some of those are kind of the basic tenets and foundations. And then you have to fill out a lot of paperwork and, you probably know.
Yeah, well, I asked
it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. So I did it for Wanderlust.
Oh, cool.
We were maybe 5 or 6 years in before we were inspired to get the certification. And yeah, it was a lot of paperwork. And year over year, we kept failing to meet the requirements because they were so stringent. But it was a really great way to kind of a really good check and balance on the business itself, because we started with this like great social mission, and then when you kind of looked under the hood, were we really checking the boxes and aligning the profitability of the company and the return that you promised to shareholders, et cetera, that is kind of in a typical operating agreement or articles of incorporation? Were we really balancing that with, a double bottom line or triple bottom line or even quadruple bottom line in terms of what does our governance look like? How were we treating our workers? Were we meeting environmental standards? And with Wanderlust, we were a festival business, so it was really hard to meet the environmental standards because we had a significant carbon footprint because people were coming in from all over the world to go to our festivals. So we had to really address that through running a carbon neutral festival and, carbon offsets, which I don't know if they're kind of a little bit of window dressing on that particular side, but it was, I think, a really, really good exercise for us, and we eventually got the certification. But I know how hard it was.
It is.
So that's why I wanted to ask you about you.
Yeah, and I love that you're right. Like when you're going through the process, you think about things that you hadn't thought about before. You're like, oh, I didn't even realize I could be doing this better or that better. And I think it's a great way for businesses to also attract talent, because I think now that people are understanding more what it means, people want to be part of companies that are doing good in the world. And so it's a great way we have such a great culture at Urban Remedy, and it's just a great way to kind of showcase your culture and to attract people that are like-minded and inspired, right? To be doing the same things that you're doing.
Absolutely. And if you look at the metrics by which a company should be judged, or I might even extrapolate and say the metrics upon which a society should be judged, it's got to be more than just maximizing return to shareholders or maximizing profit. Because when that's the only metric, what you get is an incessant exercise in externalizing all your costs or all of your expenses. So we talked about big food for a minute before, but they are an amazing example of an industry that externalizes most of its costs. So they buy GMO corn under the true cost of production, synthesize it into high fructose corn syrup products, sell that below the true cost of production, sort of at artificial low prices. So then what happens? Well, people consume them because they're cheap, and then they get sick, and they get diabetes, and it drives healthcare costs up. And who ends up paying for that? Well, consumers, taxpayers, et cetera. And so it's really an externalization of big food's costs there. But if they were to internalize those costs, they'd have to change the way that they work. And the metrics for what it meant to be a successful company wouldn't just be the bottom line, but it also might be the health of the people that consume the product, right?
If you look at our farming subsidies, it's really interesting because, people always say, why is organic food so expensive? Well, organic food is just food kind of grown in its normal way, it's so expensive because we give so much money to farms that are cotton, corn, soy, and make all these things, like you just said, exponentially cheap and inexpensive. So people think that that is, like you said, the true cost, when really if we could give some subsidies to organic farming and healing the soil, I mean, imagine what could happen. It would be incredible. And I think it's really interesting what you said, because it's like you're showcasing like the sick system that we live in. It's like we're feeding people in general, people are eating food that makes them sick, and then I always used to see people in my practice like this. They would come in, they were eating the food that caused inflammation, and then they would be on, so people would come in and they'd be like, I don't even believe in what you're doing, but I've literally been to every single doctor. I'm still sick. I'm taking 6 medications, one because I have this side effect or that side effect. And it's this cycle, right, of, you get sick, you might have some inflammatory condition. And so then you get on medications that might help with some of the symptoms that you're having. And then you have to take other stuff for other symptoms based on that medication. And you really get in this cycle. It's really sad. And people aren't taught, how to just maybe tweak their diet a little bit, or how important sleep is, or how important it is to, truly have connection to your body and make sure you're not holding in stress and whatnot. And it's very sad, because I think there should be, our medical system leaves out a bunch of really important things that could really empower people to take more control of their health.
Absolutely. And if you look at the most prevalent diseases now, what we call the chronic diseases, these are not, we often think of like heart disease and diabetes and stroke and Alzheimer's, et cetera, as natural causes of death or natural causes of disease, but they're not natural at all.
Totally.
They're actually, human-made primarily, or at least human-contributed diseases. And as you say, too often we're looking for the most reductionist answer. So you have cardiovascular disease, okay, well, take a statin. Or there's a weed growing in the garden, spray some glyphosate on it, without thinking about what are the downstream impacts of doing that beyond reducing, the endogenous creation of cholesterol for the statin, or, the destruction of a particular weed in a garden. Well, there are so many other implications to doing something like that, but we tend to kind of think in this kind of reductionist way when we're dealing with symptoms, and instead of seeing things as systems and understanding the root causes.
Yeah, and that goes back to we were talking about a little before ago, which is the Western view of looking at the body is looking at the body as a machine. And, just looking at that part. And the beautiful thing about Chinese medicine is everything is based on the interconnectedness and the theory that we're all connected. And, what is good for nature is good for us. And what is good for you is good for me. And just how, everything is related and interconnected. And, as well, as looking at our bodies like a garden, and how, to be healthy and prevent disease before disease starts. There's this great, I don't know if you've seen it, but in Chinese medicine, there's a picture of a human standing, and their feet is on the ground, and the roots are going into the ground, and their arms are up kind of like a tree to heaven. And it's like, looking at humans between heaven and earth, and how the roots represent nature, right? And our connection to nature and our surroundings, which is our food and where we live, and, honoring the land that we live on. And then our connection to God or spirit, which is also our connection to self. And unfortunately, in our culture and the way we're brought up, we don't really have a connection to nature, even to our food. Most kids have never seen a chicken lay an egg, or, how milk comes from a cow, or things like that. So we really have like this such a deep disconnection to our natural world where our food comes from, or, some kids have never been to a park or seen the ocean. And I think that creates a level of sickness or imbalance in the body.
Yeah. My
Yeah.
kids, I mean, we live in Los Angeles, so it's urban, even though we live in a relatively beautiful part of Los Angeles, so we're lucky. But my kids went off to a farm camp up sort
Oh,
of
cool.
more closer to your neck of the woods, but farther north near Jenner, just
Oh,
inland from
yeah.
Jenner. And they were up there for the month of July for a couple years. And it just absolutely changed their understanding and their relationship with the natural world.
Yeah.
And they came back. First of all, they were a different shape when they came back. They were like,
Oh,
because they were out, working on
yeah.
the farm every day. But they just had an unbelievable understanding for where their food came from, and it was really, really special. And yeah, I highly recommend just any opportunity to go and actually visit a farm. There's a wonderful farm that we go and visit near here called Apricot Lane Farms. They made the documentary called The Biggest Little Farm, and they do farm tours on the weekends and pop up a market on Saturdays, and we go up there maybe twice a year, and it's just an amazing way to reconnect with your food and where it comes from.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And
we're
if
not.
you can't, yeah. And if you can't visit a farm, even just getting out into nature and just taking quiet time to just watch the trees and how they're still or how they're moving or how they grow, and just, just finding some way to connect to the natural world is very healing.
Yeah. So another question I want to ask you, just as an entrepreneur, because I've had many, many friends with the highest, most noble intentions start companies, often food companies or CPG companies, as sometimes they're referred to, and they hit a point where they're just bumping their head on the ceiling of how to grow. And then they have to make certain kinds of compromises, whether that's HPP with juicing or in many cases they've had to sell their companies to Coke or Pepsi or whatever, just because they control all the distribution mechanisms, et cetera. And so I'm wondering, what are some of the challenges of scaling a for-profit company in alignment with your highest principles?
There's so many challenges. I mean, when I started Urban Remedy, I built out a little kitchen in San Rafael, and I was like, this is so great. I had raised $1 million just really easily, and I thought, I'm never going to need any more money, and this is it for me. And in 6 months, I outgrew that kitchen, and so for me, it's been just such a crazy journey. I'm very lucky because I do have investors like Trip, who and some of my other investors who share our mission of food is healing and really believe in it. So we have not had any issues with, any of our investors like wanting to not use organic produce or not be certified organic. And so that's been really great. But there has been a lot, I mean, there's been so many challenges, and there's still so many things that I want to change. Like, nobody's really cracked the code on fresh food. And being able to sell it nationally, right? Because you have to have a long shelf life and you worry about purge and all that kind of stuff. So we sell our fresh nationally. And, we use plastic containers, for example, and the plastic containers are 100% recycled. So the thought is that if you recycle it, it stays in the waste stream. But there's no perfection, right? Because there's no perfect packaging, for example. There's no packaging that's 100% compostable, that keeps the shelf life, that like meets all the criteria that you need to scale. And so, that would be one thing where I'm like, it feels really shitty to be, putting this gorgeous organic food in a plastic container, right? But there's really no other options. And, one of the things in that arena that I've decided is like, then there's GMO containers that are made of PLA, but then they're all made from GMO corn and wheat. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to put certified organic food in a GMO container and support that industry. So there's a lot of things that wouldn't necessarily think about. And there's a lot of really difficult decisions that have to be made. And you kind of just have to make the decisions knowing, you have to weigh the cost and the benefit for your integrity in the business. But HPP is a great example. All of my juices used to be in glass, and California changed the law. And so you cannot sell juice legally to a Whole Foods or any retailer unless it's been either heat pasteurized or HPP treated. And so right? So what's the lesser of the two evils is HPP, which is, what it is, but I'll just say in case somebody doesn't know. So you make your juice, it's cold, and then it goes through a cold water process where it puts cold water pressure on the bottle. So it kills any potential pathogens. It's called a 5-log reduction. And interestingly, I was dying. Like, I did not want to do that. And I just would sit up at night and I'm like, I just can't even believe we have to do this. I don't even know if I want to drink the juice if it's HPP'd.
Right.
And interestingly, people started to want HPP juice. Like pregnant women were like, oh, is this HPP? Because then I'm insured. I don't have to deal with the, those top pathogens. But it's, there's things like that when a legality comes into it that you kind of, there's either you close your business or you kind of have to go with the flow of things. And thankfully it's a cold process. And so, you still get enzymes and vitamins and nutrients and whatnot. But it's not perfection, and, and then when you get to a certain level, I think one of the most other difficult things is that, I'll meet like a small purveyor and I'm like, oh, I want to use this really cool ingredient. I'm so excited. And then either they can't scale with you, or the Q&A person is like, oh, their facility's not quite up to the standard. And so it leads you to a place where, for me, it feels I like have to be with some things like a little less creative, right? Because you have to work with people that can scale at a specific level, which means they have had to grow at a certain level. And so, those are some of the things that I find challenging. And sometimes I'm like, oh, it used to be so fun when I had just a few stores and I could just do whatever I wanted. So but I also am so grateful that we are national and that, people could find certified organic food at their local Whole Foods stores rather than eating like a salad with, we were talking about like canola oil or something like that. So, so there's a cost and a benefit with everything.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being so honest about that. And I've had to confront it all my life as a conscious capitalist is, where can you make legitimate compromises and where do you have to completely hold the line? And, when we were running Wanderlust and we had one festival, it was we do have a lot of nostalgia, right, for those days when the business was like super young and super pure and very homespun and essentially run out of your garage, quote unquote,
Yeah.
And those are wonderful days. But then, if you really want to bend the arc of how a certain industry does business, then you want to have impact and you want to scale. And then what are the obstacles and the systems and structures that have been created that create barriers for, scale to move along with integrity? And I think, you just always really have to use your best judgment and, be as transparent about it as possible. So I'm really grateful that, for your transparency on it. And, I think this is part of the, what being an entrepreneur is like, right?
Yeah. Well, I look and I see that there is really not a lot of certified organic all day parts companies out there. And if you're going to get a salad, if you're going to eat out, it's really hard to find super clean food. Most restaurants you go to, if you say, are you using canola oil or soy oil? They all do. And, they need to do it for their costs. And I totally get that. So, but I feel really happy that Urban Remedy is it's kind of like a food safe zone. Like we never use gluten, dairy, seed oils, white sugar, white flour, any of those things. So we've stayed in that construct. So that's the most important thing to me, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. What about the experience of being a female entrepreneur? I would say that I find that there is an increasing number of very successful female entrepreneurs within this space. And like you, I've gone to Expo West for many, many, many years. I kind of watched it transform from a smaller kind of conference to this juggernaut that feels almost more like a venture capital conference.
Yeah, it does.
And it was very, very male dominated for many, many years. And overwhelmingly, it probably still is. But, to be honest, most of my friends now who are starting businesses in this space are women. So I'm wondering what your experience has been. Have you confronted specific kinds of challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yes. I'm trying to think of what I can actually share with you, but I would say that, even now I have a great board, but I'm the only female, on our board, and it would be great, to have another female on the board. And I think, for women, especially if you're starting out, as a creative, or you're doing something as a passion project, and then you have to take funding, there's this really specific language that is spoken that a lot of us don't speak. And so, I remember when I first got funding, being in meetings and really not understanding what anybody was talking about. I didn't know what ROI meant. I didn't know what, so many of the sayings mean. And I've learned so much over time. It's been a great experience, but it's very intimidating to come into that arena and not, fully, I'm an acupuncturist, right? So I could talk anything about Chinese medicine and health, but finance and investment and, all of that stuff was really foreign to me. And it was very intimidating and scary. So when you're in that situation, sometimes you can shrink and, it's very intimidating. And so, I would say I'll give you two examples. When I first took funding, I had a logo that I loved and it was really feminine. And the company, the guys that I was working with were like, you know what, we're just going to change your logo and, do all of this. And they came out with this just super masculine logo and, maybe renamed some things. And I looked at it and I was like, ugh, I was thinking, this is so not Urban Remedy. I hate it. But I didn't say anything because I didn't want to rock the boat and sound like a bitch, right? An ungrateful woman. And so over the years, I still struggle with it, but over the years, I've had to, learn that, well, if somebody thinks I'm a bitch, then that's fine. I try to say things from a loving place, but I do think that saying is true. When we're in a meeting like that and a man says, well, this is what I think is right. And, X, Y, and Z reasoning, people are like, wow, that's a strong man. But a lot of times when a woman comes off and does that, we're still considered difficult or, that. And it's sad, but I do think that is alive and well. And I've had one other situation where, and I'm not working with this person anymore, but where, raises were being brought up, between my CEO and I hope the person doesn't ever listen to this podcast, but, they were like, oh, Neka doesn't really need a raise. And the CEO does. And that was the first time I remember I was actually genuinely furious. And the person said, well, Neka, what else can you offer to the company? And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? I create every single product. I manage all the creative, I don't need to list off all the things I do, but it was almost having to
Justify yourself.
Justify
somehow.
myself.
Yeah.
I started this company. This is my vision, and being in that situation was the first time I ever really felt what it feels like. And it was really a difficult situation to be in.
Yeah. Well, I can't relate to all of that, but I can relate to some of the terminology and the taxonomy of business. And, I didn't go to business school either. I was a musician and then I was in the music industry, and I sat in, dozens upon dozens of meetings, sort of nodding my head, smiling, being like, I have no idea what they're saying. And, that can be very dangerous,
Yes.
because if you don't know what, preferred equity is or something,
Yes.
you can
Yes.
kind of, all of a sudden you find that your shares are buried under a whole a host of other shares of people who have liquidation preference over you. And, but this is part of growing up, it's like, and learning and being honest with yourself about like what you don't know, and and being curious, and learning. But I think, so many of us who start companies, we're actually coming from a place of the soul or a creative place.
Yeah.
And we don't necessarily have all of the business chops.
Yes.
So,
I'm so glad you shared that. I'm not alone, because I always, and then it's so good to remind people, like, to ask questions. And I always tell people, get a really great lawyer, because you might not ever really understand it. Like for me, I don't even want to, it's not that I don't want to understand it, but I'll be like, okay, this is something a lawyer can explain to me at a high level, because it's very nuanced and very intricate and difficult to interpret on a lot of levels.
I totally agree. Honestly, one of the best things I ever did was found the world's greatest small little corporate law firm. And anytime I have a question, and I still have tons,
Yeah.
I can be dumb in private with them. To say, hey, what does this mean? Or, can you help me develop some language around this that, protects the company, et cetera. So,
That's so good.
never be too proud to
Well,
realize.
if you didn't learn anything
know.
on this podcast today, that would be like one of the best takeaways,
Totally.
to have a good attorney to explain it to you. Yeah, that is really good.
So, where can you find Urban Remedy products now? And can you just discuss a little bit about the different businesses that you have within Urban Remedy? Because primarily your products business, right?
Yeah. So we're multi-channel, which has made things very difficult. In the beginning, I was like, we could sell things online and, sell to retail stores. And have our own retail stores, and sell in businesses like Whole Foods. And so we used to have a lot of retail stores in California, and now we've downsized. We have 5 stores, which we are going to keep open in the Bay Area, San Francisco, Marin County, and the East Bay. And then we're primarily in Whole Foods. We have in a lot of Whole Foods, we have these kiosks where it's branded Urban Remedy, and we have all the day parts in there. And then we're in, a bunch of other natural grocers, and we're in Kroger. You could find some of our shots and juices in Kroger, which was super exciting for us. We're in delivery apps, like you can order Urban Remedy on Amazon Prime if it's at your local Whole Foods store. And then we ship from our website, direct to consumer. And so there's a bunch of meal plans on there. But you can order almost all of our products on our website, and we ship it directly to your door. So there's lots of ways to find Urban Remedy. But we're really focused right now on growing, our presence in Whole Foods. So you can find us at Whole Foods on all over, obviously, the West Coast, the East Coast, and then we're in the Rocky Mountains. We're hopefully expanding into Texas. We're in Philadelphia. So if you look on our website, if anybody's interested, there's a locations page that shows all the places that we are offered.
Amazing. And my sense is that you're always envisioning the next thing. So I wonder if there are any little intimations of products or just different creative projects that you're just starting to cook up now.
Yeah, I have two things that I'm really excited about that are, one just launched and the next is launching in the next 5 weeks. So I developed a sun square, which is, I don't know if you ever had it, but it's like a sunflower butter square with chocolate on top, and it's kind of sweet and salty. It's really, really good. And I made a line of those. So I have the regular one, and now I have one with lion's mane and coffee. Like it's a kind of salty coffee flavor. I'll send you some. And then the last one is a crispy rice, and it's kind of like my play on a crispy rice chocolate bar. And then so that's a whole new platform that we just launched. And then the other platform that I'm so excited about is I developed these cookies a long time ago that are all dehydrated and grain-free, a chocolate chip cookie. But I have reformed that a little bit and then added an oatmeal walnut cookie and a double chocolate. And they are, not to brag, but they are so good. I can't even keep them in my house because I literally eat them all. There's like a bag of cookie bites, and then there's a single cookie. So we're launching those soon. And I'm so excited because they are free of white sugar and they don't have any dairy. And 2 of the versions are grain-free. And so it's I love it because it's a great example of you could eat a cookie that has, like corn syrup or white sugar and white flour, and that's going to promote inflammation. Like I'm just going on what we were talking about before, but these cookies that I've developed actually would be lower inflammatory cookies, right? Because they don't have white flour, they don't have white sugar, they're grain-free. They have a really low, very low net carbs, except the oatmeal one, because that's made with oatmeal. But, and they're absolutely delicious. So it's so great. It's like a kind of fun, indulgent snack that you can have without feeling guilty.
Yeah, they sound amazing. I wonder, do you have a go-to sweetener that you use?
You know what? I've been using stevia for so many years, and a lot of people really don't like it. But I even have stevia plants, and I like stevia. I use it in my matcha and my tea. I feel that it's kind of like cilantro. Like some people taste a soapy flavor. But for me personally, I know a lot of people don't like it, so I try not to use it in too many products. But I like stevia. I like monk fruit. I'll use if I'm going to use something that is going to spike my blood sugar, I'll do like a honey or a Monica honey or something like that. But I'm the kind of person, I don't even have white sugar in my kitchen because I don't need to use it because there's so many other things that I can use. Not that white flour. I mean, I think with all this being said, you also have to enjoy your life. And if you eat some white sugar, don't be hard on yourself. But
yeah.
But I don't need it in general. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that you wrote a book. Do you ever have any other plans or inspirations to write another book?
I do. I mean, I would love to write another book. I wrote my book so long ago, and I look at it and I'm like, oh, there's so many things I would change. Right when I was starting Urban Remedy and I just gotten divorced and I had, my son was 1 year old, I got an offer to write a book. And that was when I was the CEO, head of procurement, HR. And so I wrote this book pretty quickly while I was busy. And so I wasn't really able, I don't feel like there's a lot of things I may have done differently, but I've been thinking about it. I would love to do another book that was more lifestyle and really talked about, we were talking about before, helping people to understand their innate healing capacity and the powers of just simply living in harmony with nature. And I think you and I talked about it a little bit. We had a conversation, just about how, there's so many biohacking things and science things, where people are optimizing their health, which is great. And I love reading and learning about all of that. But I think that it can be overwhelming for a lot of people, and just, getting back to the really simplistic things of sleeping and and connecting and calming your nervous system and just like all of these beautiful, simple things. I just feel like is such an amazing message to share because most people just really don't even think about those things. And so anyways, that's probably what my book would be about.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to it. I hope you can carve out the time to do it. It's a monumental task, and it's hard to do in 5-minute increments, as I'm finding right now. I'm trying to write a book, and I have been relegated to writing like 2 sentences at a time, and it does not working very well. So I hope that you can find a respite in your operational life to do it, because I know how much the world could benefit from it.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to read your book too. When do you think yours is coming out?
Oh gosh, I don't know. That gestation period might be quite long, but I'm chipping away at it. My wife keeps encouraging me to like just clear 2 weeks and go to the desert. So I'm gonna see when I can do that, and at least
I like that idea. That's great. Well, I can't wait to read it. Sounds like it's going to be really interesting.
Cool. Well, Neka, it's been such a joy to be with you. I hope to be with you in 4-dimensional space-time sometime if I come up your way, or if you ever come down to Southern California and come to our little retreat in Topanga.
Yes, I would love that. Yeah, reach out. If you guys are in this area, definitely reach out. I'd love to meet you guys in person.
Sounds great.
All right,
okay,
thank you
Neka.
so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this interview from the Commune podcast, then click subscribe and check out this video right here.